Tomorrow Never Dies ended up being both a bit of a commercial and critical failure of a game, as it never came close to matching the sales numbers or praise as GoldenEye did. But Electronic Arts chose to push on. As I stated before, the Tomorrow Never Dies game came out days before The World Is Not Enough the film, so it seemed logical for them to try and get out a game for The World Is Not Enough as soon as possible, before the movie started to feel, too old for a game adaptation. Well, they stayed at least within 1 year of the film release. Sort of. The World Is Not Enough the film came out in November of 1999 and stars Pierce Brosnan in his third go-around as 007, Sophie Marceau as Electra King, Robert Carlyle as Renard, and Denise Richards as Christmas Jones. Dr. Christmas Jones, with the once again returned roles of Judi Dench as M, Desmond Llewellyn as Q, and Samantha Bond as Moneypenny. Tragically, Desmond Llewellyn passed away in December of 1999 from a car accident, thus ending his impressive and beloved tenure in the Bond series, since 1963's From Russia with Love. John Cleese rounds out the cast as R, Q's apprentice in the film. The film deals with MI6 being attacked and billionaire Sir Robert King dying in the explosion. M sends Bond to protect King's daughter, Electra, from former KGB terrorist Victor Renard Zokas. The World Is Not Enough ranks 18th in the highest grossing of the series, adjusted for inflation, and is Brosnan's lowest in that regard. It tends to conjure up a lot of notoriety for the role of a nuclear physicist being played by Denise Richards, and unfortunately that's mostly what the film is known for nowadays. But at this point, the turn of the century was on the horizon, and Brosnan was solidified in the role. The year 2000 in video games saw the transition of the 5th generation to the 6th generation, with the PlayStation phasing over to the PlayStation 2, the Nintendo GameCube set to take over for the Nintendo 64 in 2001, and even Sega returning to the mix with the Dreamcast. The Game Boy Color was the frontrunner in the handheld market. But Electronic Arts had 3 different developers working on 3 different versions of The World Is Not Enough, and for 3 different systems at 3 different release dates. It seemed like a complicated mess, but the first release was developed by Eurocom for the Nintendo 64 and was released on October 17, 2000 in North America. Eurocom previously worked on James Bond Jr. and will work on a few more Bond games in the future. In 2000, Nintendo's main console was still the Nintendo 64, and it would remain so until 2001. After Rare developed GoldenEye, they continued to develop more games for Nintendo, including a game called Perfect Dark, which used the same control scheme and engine as GoldenEye, released in May of 2000. It was really the spiritual sequel to GoldenEye, although with a completely original non-James Bond story, and while not being quite as big of a success, it still ranks in the top 20 in the best-selling Nintendo 64 games. What Rare did not develop was an adaptation of The World Is Not Enough. That job went to developer Eurocom, and it ultimately ranked at 44th, selling about 1.5 million less copies than Perfect Dark did. I remember getting Perfect Dark back then and absolutely loving it. Everything felt improved in it from GoldenEye, and I played it so much over the next year or so. Because of this, I was incredibly excited for the release of The World Is Not Enough, and I was absolutely ready to get it for Christmas, and that's exactly what I got. Being 14 years old at the time with no internet access, I didn't know much about game developers or anything of the sort, so I had no idea that Rare was not the team behind the release. I expected an even better Perfect Dark this time around, and well, yeah, we'll get into that. Also, this was the first Bond game I ever owned. But, okay, let's check out the back of the box. Experience the intensity of being the world's top secret agent. Equipped with a full arsenal of Q-Lab gadgets and weaponry, you must be suave, resourceful, and lethal as you carry out action-packed missions based on the blockbuster movie. Are you cool under pressure? Deadly when necessary? Of course you are. You're Bond. James Bond. Here we go. No gun barrel sequence. Huh. I didn't remember this, and that's a bit surprising. It just kinda cuts to a still title screen. Well, that's pretty lame. Anyway, we're shown a level screen containing 14 levels this time. I remember it being pretty faithful to the film, and like with GoldenEye, I had played this game before seeing the movie, so I didn't really have a frame of reference as to what to do or what was going on. Our first level is the Courier, matching the pre-title sequence in the film. I believe it's the longest Bond pre-title sequence to date as well. Anyway, Bond arrives at a Swiss bank in Spain in order to retrieve money for a Sir Robert King. Our objectives for the game on Agent: collect equipment from safety deposit box, and a Bond game classic, avoid civilian casualties. Also returning are directives from MI6, complete with a very poor black and white image of M, Chief of Staff Robinson, and R, Q's assistant in the film. M tends to give you story directives, Robinson gives you some background on where you are, and R helps to explain your secondary gadgets that you'll have. So it begins with a little cutscene, and right away, I think the graphics look pretty good for the Nintendo 64. It still looks primitive nowadays, but it also looks less rigid or pixelated than GoldenEye, and especially Tomorrow Never Dies. Also returning is, more importantly, a first-person perspective. I stand by that Bond works best in the first person, although there will be some third-person games in the future with decent controls. Also making a return from Tomorrow Never Dies is voice acting. This time we have Tim Bentinck as the voice of Bond. Among your screen, you can see an aiming reticle starting in the center and Bond's health in the top left corner. After bringing up a weapon, your ammo count appears in the bottom right corner. They keep it basic, and that's how it should be. Complicated HUD screens can get bothersome. For this mission, you're given only a stun watch from the get-go. Simply walk into one of the first rooms you find and open the safety deposit box, and what's this? You're all of a sudden given a third objective. Collect Sir Robert's money from LaChase's vault. This is a new concept and sort of adds a sense of quick thinking, something Bond is forced to do all the time in the films. I like this addition. After getting through security, we're treated to a cutscene replicating the movie, complete with expressionless speaking faces that the N64 excelled at. Bond is trying to get a name of an MI6 agent that was killed, and all of a sudden, a girl next to you shoots the banker. There's an explosion, and the man next to you just falls over on his face. The first time I played this, I was like, what even just happened? You're then given a new objective: crack safe and obtain swipe card. Then you can engage in combat, and well, maybe it's the sound of the gun combined with the awkward movements of enemies, but something just feels off and less satisfying in combat. It's a different kind of awkward than in Tomorrow Never Dies, but eventually you do get adjusted to it. It took me a while to really get into the game when I first got it, but I eventually got pretty good at it and beat it multiple times. It's hard to pinpoint what it is, but the shooting just feels so inauthentic in this. Obviously, it is a video game, and I don't need blood and realism in my Bond game or anything, but it feels cheaper in this game than in GoldenEye. But you do have to figure out where to use what gadgets in order to get the briefcase of money that's comically open and right out on the table before escaping. Quite honestly, it's a good introduction level. You encounter a combination of enemies to shoot, innocent bankers to not shoot, and police trying to shoot you, but you can only avoid or use your stun gun to stop them. A pretty good start to show you what sort of game you're getting into. The second level, King's Ransom, takes place in your own headquarters, MI6, which is really cool to see. Like in the movie, a bomb goes off in MI6, killing Sir Robert, or almost killing him. You are to protect all primary MI6 personnel, avoid civilian and security guard casualties, and find Sir Robert. As a fanboy, it's pretty awesome to begin this mission in M's office, and you walk out to see Moneypenny standing there. Enemies begin entering MI6 through the windows, and you can use your authority to get security windows closed in order to stop more incoming enemies. After making your way through, you're told to activate the sprinkler system to stop the fires. After doing so, you make your way to the vaults where you find a dying Sir Robert who tells you that a pen was the detonator. Q then radios you, telling you to get to the Q labs fast because the suspect is escaping on a boat. Before getting to the vaults, you remember that you passed a map of MI6 showing where the Q labs are. Get to Q Division, which ends the level with Bond getting in a speedboat, and somebody tells him that the boat isn't finished. It doesn't look like Q or R, so I'm not sure who it's supposed to be. Anyway, I think this is a really awesome level. The Thames Chase is next, which is the conclusion to the pre-title sequence in the movie, but I will end it there now per tradition. The first level causes you to figure out what gadgets to use and where. This one ups the chaos level by having your own workplace being attacked. I love being able to walk around MI6 and see M, Moneypenny, Robinson, and everybody. Something that hasn't been done since James Bond 007 on the Game Boy. The stakes feel high, and being only the second level, it's not incredibly difficult. It's really an awesome start to the game, and is still feeling faithful to the movie. It's the awkward combat that does bring it down a tad, but you do get used to it, and for me personally, I still say the game isn't as good as GoldenEye, but definitely an improvement over Tomorrow Never Dies. This will be the last Bond game on the Nintendo 64, which means, yeah, they obviously brought back multiplayer for this one, something sorely missing from Tomorrow Never Dies with only the 2 controller ports. Multiplayer in this features 10 levels with 4 unlockable ones. And in a pretty cool feature, you can play by yourself with AI bots to add a little variety when you don't have any friends and you're just making Bond videos on YouTube. You can have it where up to 4 players can be in. Weapons and game settings can be unlocked for more customizable playstyles down the road, as well as certain returning characters like, you guessed it, Jaws and Oddjob. Also, a couple returning Bond classics like Scaramanga and Max Zorin, which is cool to see. The multiplayer here can be a lot of fun, and while not as legendary as GoldenEye or even Perfect Dark, which in my opinion is the best multiplayer experience out there, yeah, I said it, The World Is Not Enough on the Nintendo 64 can feature a good time to be had by all. I would place it as the second best Bond game up to this point. But there are still 2 more versions to cover. Next up, EA Games sought out Black Ops Entertainment returning from Tomorrow Never Dies to make a legit PlayStation sequel. Weirdly enough, their version of The World Is Not Enough was released on November 8th, 2000 in North America, less than 2 weeks after the PlayStation 2 was released. The PlayStation 2 was backward compatible with PlayStation games, but I can't imagine there was much hype at all for this game to come out when it did. Firstly, it's a game for a movie that came out 1 year prior. Secondly, it was for a now older system while everybody was out getting PlayStation 2s for the holiday season. Thirdly, it was by the same developer that received lackluster reviews for Tomorrow Never Dies. And fourthly, it's almost a month after the Nintendo 64 version had already been out. It wasn't looking good for the PlayStation version, but we'll see how it compares and give it a fair shot. I have never played this version before, so it will be based on my first impressions of this game. Also, it did not crack the top 100 of the best-selling PlayStation games. But let's check out the back of the CD case. Experience the intensity of being the world's top secret agent. Oh, it's just the same as the Nintendo 64 one. Oh wait, they switched out the word deadly for cunning. Huh. What a weird choice. Anyway, let's do this. Good lord, it's not even closer that this intro beats out the Nintendo 64 one. This one has the gun barrel sequence, the music, exciting scenes of the movie and the game, just like the intro to Tomorrow Never Dies. It gets you pumped up to play it. The N64 one had a title screen. Point goes to the PlayStation right off the bat. So we get to our level select screen, and there are 11 as opposed to 14 in the other one. This could be good or bad, as it's less to play, but also could be less filler, depending on how you see it. Everything in the briefing is better too. Adam Blackwood is reprising his voice talents as Pierce Brosnan's Bond. M is still clearly not Judi Dench, but R is actually voiced by John Cleese, who plays R in the film, so that's pretty cool.
Frequency disruptor. When activated, all metals within a 5-foot radius become undetectable.
The pictures look better and much more clear as well. And Moneypenny puts in her 2 cents instead of Robinson, so that's also a plus. Even the loading screen is better. But the main thing here is how do the controls and gameplay compare? Well, we start with actual footage from the movie, which leads into the level proper. This is similar to their Tomorrow Never Dies entry, and it's nice to help immerse yourself into the game more than the 64 one. We're starting in the courier like before, except it looks darker and grittier. Also, we're actually in first person now like in the N64 version, and unlike Black Ops' Tomorrow Never Dies. I guess they either wanted to try something different or assume the fans wanted it back to first person. There is now a little action rectangle that appears for you to trigger different things to happen. So you speak to the receptionist, then use your pen disruptor to stop the alarm from going off by simply just walking right by everybody. You then get rejected entry from further into the bank. What cunning does Bond have to use to outsmart this? Oh, you just wait for him to walk away and then you go through the door. Man, security here sucks. So far, this is a very different start from the N64 one. It's now easy to see that this is an entirely different game, and this is not something I realized until doing this project. I learned something today. Anyway, make your way through the bank trying not to get detected by cameras. I got noticed by the first one, so I was forced to plow through a bunch of enemies that may or may not have deserved it. I'm Bond. I can murder 30 people in a bank and still complete the mission. You then use your fingerprint scanner on a coffee cup, I guess, which then opens locked doors. You were able to locate La Chase like in the movie, resulting in just as awkward of a cutscene as the N64 version until you grab the briefcase and smash the window to complete it. Yeah, that was extremely different from the 64 version. I think that one may have been a little more faithful to the movie, but whatever, they had to come up with something for the video game. I think this level was more difficult to figure out, but I'm also more used to the 64 version and the controls. It's definitely neat to see this though. Mission 2 is also called King's Ransom, but I now see why there are less levels in this version. The bombing that occurs in MI6 is now reduced to only being in the briefing by M. You then see the actual scene in the movie of the boat chase between Bond and the assassin, but actually playing the level is chasing her through the streets of London, mowing down enemies until you get to her hot air balloon that she tries to escape in the movie. This is actually the third mission in the 64 version, so they seem to be kind of streamlining it here for the PS1. I think you're timed, but I could be wrong. It's a fast-paced level either way, and is a good practice for shooting, even with the auto-aim. Once you reach the hot air balloon, use your grappling hook watch to grab onto the bottom, and it's completed. So there we are, the first two levels of both versions. I think the PlayStation 1 is pretty decent actually, and did some things way better than Nintendo 64 one. While I do prefer the N64's controls a little more, that could just be a personal preference. With that said, their first person entry works so much better than the third person in Tomorrow Never Dies. This version is easily a step up in terms of quality, although the timing of when it came out for a then outdated system was a bit unfortunate for its release. But once again, I think the main aspect holding this one back is the lack of multiplayer. I'm sort of surprised they didn't just implement at least a 2-player multiplayer to make use of the 2 controllers, but that did not happen. It's hard to say which is the better version, but we have yet one more to cover. In the order of James Bond game releases, there was actually yet another EA Games release for the PlayStation in November of 2000. My god, they were just churning these out like Krispy Kreme donuts back then, weren't they? That game is 007 Racing, but instead of talking about it now, I'll be talking about it in part 15. For now, fast forward to September of 2001, now almost 2 full years after the release of The World Is Not Enough the movie. We're now closer to the release of Brosnan's 4th film, Die Another Day, than we are to The World Is Not Enough. But Electronic Arts wasn't done yet. They wanted in on the handheld market as well. They hired a very small developer based out of California by the name of 2N Productions to make their take on The World Is Not Enough for the Game Boy Color. I couldn't find much about them, but all I could see is that they only developed this game and WCW Mayhem. As with many other attempts of bringing a franchise to the Game Boy or Game Boy Color, there have to be some adjustments made due to the lack of graphic ability and controls. Resident Evil Gaiden is one that comes to mind. It is not among the best-selling Game Boy or Game Boy Color games, unfortunately. Like with the PlayStation version, I have never played this before, so it will also be based on my first impressions. So were they a bit late to the party with this one? Let's check out the back of the box. Enter the sophisticated world of high-tech espionage as Her Majesty's greatest spy, James Bond. Experience all the intense actions, spycraft, and the state-of-art gadgetry synonymous with Bond. Work with helpful allies such as Dr. Christmas Jones and M to stop the treacherous villain Renard. Your mission? Save the world. Are you up for it? Of course you are. You're Bond. James Bond. Okay, at least this one's a little different, although every single one of these ends with Bond, James Bond. I guess it's too easy not to. Let's do this. Okay, well we have the gun barrel sequence here too, which makes the lack of it on the Nintendo 64 stand out even more. They did a decent job for recording it on the Game Boy, and oh my god, what is that? Denise Richards looks horrifying. When I mentioned Resident Evil Gaiden, I didn't think I would be thinking of it again. That is the undead right there. At least Pierce Brosnan looks pretty good. What happened here? I gotta get off this screen. This game ultimately has 8 missions, down from the PlayStation's 11, which is down from the 64's 14, but this is the Game Boy Color, so I expected it to be around 8. Also, something interesting to know is that this game is functional with the Nintendo 64's transfer pack. The transfer pack was a little device that connects a Game Boy game to the back of a Nintendo 64 controller to unlock certain features. Probably the most notable use for this is transferring Pokemon from the original games into Pokemon Stadium on the N64. But for this game, apparently it gives more features to multiplayer on World's Not Enough for the Nintendo 64. It's not groundbreaking, but it's something. It's sort of like the Amiibo giving minor perks with the more modern Nintendo systems. We're briefed by M per normal, and it starts in Spain per usual. No surprises there. We then see Bond in a top-down view with the now much improved color graphics over the original Game Boy. I think it looks pretty good and definitely showcases the point between the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance, which was already released for months at this point. Man, their timing for releasing games on new systems has been a bit off. Our objectives are roughly the same. Speak with LeChase, get his money, escape the bank. I like how widely different the bank looks in all three versions, and none of them look like it does in the film. Anyway, Bond moves in a grid-like pattern, being able to move in 4 directions. Bond's health is the red bar in the bottom left corner, and the bottom middle is what you have equipped. The bottom right corner indicates how many objectives have been completed. Combat in this is pretty funny. Punching actually seems faster and more effective than your gun, so just wail on dudes 4 times to do away with them. These guys can forget you even exist within seconds too. Unlike the other versions, this bank is a bit of a maze and you can enter all of these empty offices for no reason. Make your way to the 4th floor and speak with LeChase. After Bond threatens LeChase's life, LeChase is now lying on the ground and the 2 guys in green go after you. If you weren't familiar with the other games or the movie, you'd assume Bond killed him, right? It's not clear at all what happened. You take his briefcase, and instead of yeeting yourself out the window like in the PlayStation one, this one has you leisurely strolling down every single maze floor and taking the stairs until you make it to the 1st floor. This is more akin to the 64 version, but man, you really take your time getting out of here. Find a key in the courtyard area, I guess, to unlock the door on the 1st floor and just simply walk out the front door. Yeah, this definitely feels more Game Boy-y, but they had to come up with something. I can't imagine it would have worked too well being in first person on the Game Boy Color with, the D-pad and all. I mean, it's not the original PlayStation 1 controller. Mission 2, also like in the 64 version, takes place in MI6 after the explosion goes off. You are to wander around MI6, although there's nothing to set it apart to make it even look like it would be MI6. As far as I know, you must come to blows with every enemy in the building to secure it, while finding a brown and silver switch on each floor that must be pressed in that order. Just go with it. And then there are some new obstacles to be in your way, like lasers to avoid, like you're in a Mega Man game. Some of these take forever to go away too. I mean, look at this. One floor has an electric floor with a moving current, which can be frustrating, and then the bottom floor is actually pretty easy. You obtain a key to enter the Q lab and escape on a boat, just like in the 64 version. Wow, well, I'll give it to them. They came up with something pretty unique compared to the other 2 versions. So is this game necessary? Honestly, probably not. I like that they gave a small developer a chance, but it's just so weird to pick The World's Not Enough way near the last quarter of 2001. They could have picked any Bond story to go here, or even made up their own, and it would have probably made more sense. Die Another Day was out the following year, but they chose to cram this in here. But, is it fun? Not really, no. It's not terrible or unplayable by any means, but I spent my time in these first 2 levels walking around slowly punching guys 4 times in a row, trying to find switches and keys in a building maze. Unless it gets way different in the later levels, that's the game. I will get this for my collection down the road and try to complete it then, however. So which is the best version? Well, it's hard to say really. I think it's pretty obvious that the Game Boy Color one comes in 3rd. It's simply a step back in every way, but it's so it can be played on the go. I think the pros for the PlayStation version are that it has the best quality all around with the better looking screens, implemented scenes from the movie, and a far superior intro. Pros for the Nintendo 64 one are slightly better controls, more variety in levels, and the fact there's actual multiplayer. For that reason, I think the N64 one ever so slightly takes the cake, as it gives the best value of all 3. Although if you're hosting a 64 multiplayer party, I doubt that The World Is Not Enough will be a top contender, unless there's a lot of nostalgia involved, I don't know. The PlayStation one surprised me though, and certainly has its merits. I think it's kinda cool that the game went to 3 different developers to see what they could come up with. And I thought Christmas only comes once a year. I gotta remember to cut that out. That was bad. So as I stated before, we're going back in time less than 1 year ago. Electronic Arts figured, hey, James Bond is known for cars and vehicles and whatnot. Let's make a 007 racing game. But let's also release it for the PlayStation after the PlayStation 2 is out in North America. A discussion will be had next time. Thanks again, everyone, for being with me through my 14th part. And if you're new here, hey, a like and or subscribe always brings me great joy and keeps me going with the end in mind. I'll see you for part 15 for some high-octane action. Maybe. James Bond will return in 007 Racing.